We talk endlessly about the oldest child and their pressure to achieve. We talk about the youngest and how spoiled they supposedly are. But there's this entire person who grows up sandwiched in between, quietly watching, quietly adapting. And almost nobody stops to ask what that actually does to a person. The middle child. Here's what's actually happening inside their head. Picture this. You're 7 years old at the dinner table. Your older sibling just got praised for a report card. Your younger sibling just got praised for finishing their vegetables. And you got asked to pass the salt. Not because anyone meant to ignore you, just because attention in a family is a limited resource, and somehow it keeps landing everywhere except on you. You didn't complain, you probably don't even remember that specific dinner. But your brain remembers the pattern, and patterns repeated enough times quietly become identity. Or picture this instead. Family photo day. Everyone lines up. The oldest stands proudly in front because they're responsible enough to be trusted near the good camera. The youngest gets scooped up and placed front and centre because, well, they're the baby. And you end up somewhere in the back row, half cropped out, squinting into the sun, waiting for someone to notice you're not actually in the frame. Multiply that moment by 1,000 small variations spread across 18 years, and you start to understand why so many middle children describe their childhood the same way. Not bad, just unseen. A study published in the Journal of Family Psychology found that birth order shapes not just how parents behave toward a child, but how that child learns to behave in order to be noticed at all. For firstborns, the strategy is achievement. For lastborns, it's charm. For middle children, researchers found something different entirely: negotiation. Middle children become the family's unofficial diplomats before they even understand what diplomacy means. Ask any middle child what their job was growing up, and most of them won't say, the smart one, or the funny one. They'll pause because they were never handed a label like that. Instead, without ever being told to, they became the translator between siblings, the buffer between parents, the one who smoothed things over before an argument even had the chance to start. Nobody assigned that role. It was just quietly absorbed, the way a plant leans toward whatever light happens to be available. Think about it. You weren't the one setting the rules like your older sibling sometimes got to. You weren't the one exempt from the rules like your younger sibling often was. You existed in the space between authority and freedom, which meant you had to learn how to read a room instead of dominate it. You had to learn how to compromise instead of demand. You had to learn how to disappear a little, just to keep the peace. That skill doesn't switch off when you turn 18 and leave the house. But here's what's fascinating. That same invisible kid, wiring that felt like a disadvantage growing up, becomes one of the most valuable psychological traits an adult can have. Middle children consistently test higher in empathy. They're better at reading social dynamics. They're the friend who somehow always knows when something's wrong before anyone says a word out loud. Not because they're mystical, because they spent years surviving on emotional radar. You learn to notice shifts in mood the way other people notice weather. A tightened jaw. A pause half a second too long. You clocked it all, quietly, because being the middle meant nobody was going to explain the room to you. You had to figure it out yourself. Think about how that plays out later, at 25, 30, 40. You're the one at work who senses tension in a meeting before anyone says a word. You're the one in your friend group who texts, "Hey, you okay?" the moment someone goes quiet in the group chat. Other people call it intuition. It isn't intuition, it's training. Years and years of unpaid, unrecognised training that started at a dinner table you probably don't even remember. And that's the part that stings a little, if we're honest. Somewhere along the way, a lot of middle children absorb a belief that isn't even true. The belief that they matter less, that their wins are smaller, that their pain is less urgent than everyone else's, because someone else always seemed to need the room more. Psychologists call this positional deprivation. The quiet, cumulative sense of being emotionally rationed. Even in a loving home, it's rarely dramatic. It's not one traumatic event. It's 1,000 tiny moments of being the third name called, the second photo taken, the last one asked how their day went. Here's the part almost nobody says out loud though. That deprivation doesn't just disappear once you leave home. It often follows you quietly into adulthood, disguised as something else entirely. The instinct to shrink your own needs in a relationship, so your partner doesn't feel crowded. The habit of downplaying a hard day at work because a co-worker's day sounded worse. The reflex to apologize for taking up space in a conversation you were fully invited into. None of that is weakness, it's an old survival strategy, still quietly running in the background, long after the situation that created it is gone. But wait, it gets weirder. Because that exact same wiring, the one built out of feeling overlooked, is also what makes middle children exceptional at something most people struggle with their entire lives: fairness. Middle children grow up to be the ones who notice when someone's being left out at a party. The ones who split the bill evenly without being asked. The ones who go quiet in a meeting. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they're mentally checking who hasn't spoken yet. There's a reason so many mediators, therapists and diplomats identify as middle children. You don't have to search hard to find that pattern once you know to look for it. The exact thing that made you feel unseen as a kid trained you to become the person other people feel safest around as an adult. Think about the people in your own life you'd actually call in a crisis. Not the loudest ones, not the ones who need the story to be about them within 30 seconds. The calm ones, the ones who ask good questions instead of jumping straight to advice. There's a decent chance a few of them grew up right in the middle of their family, quietly perfecting the exact skill set the situation now needs. Here's the emotional twist, though. The middle child spends years assuming they need to earn attention, when really, what they were building the whole time was something rarer than attention. They were building attunement. Attention fades. Attunement doesn't. The oldest sibling learns how to be impressive. The youngest learns how to be adored. But the middle child learns how to actually understand people. And understanding people, quietly, is the thing that ends up mattering most in every relationship you'll ever have. If you've spent your whole life feeling like the background character in your own family story, I want you to sit with something for a second. That instinct to check on everyone else before checking on yourself. That radar you didn't ask for but developed anyway. That's not proof you were forgettable. That's proof you were paying closer attention than anyone realised. It's worth saying this plainly because middle children rarely get told it directly. You were not a mistake in the birth order. You were not the in-between child by accident. Somebody in that family needed to become the glue, the translator, the one who kept the peace when everyone else was too busy being the star or the baby. That role fell to you, and even though nobody thanked you for it at the time, it shaped you into someone genuinely rare. You weren't invisible. You were just never given a spotlight, so you learned how to read the whole room instead. And in a world absolutely full of people who only know how to perform for attention, someone who actually knows how to listen, notice, and understand is not the overlooked one. They're the one everyone eventually turns to when things get hard. That's not a consolation prize. That's a genuine advantage, one most people spend decades in therapy trying to learn on purpose. You just picked it up for free, at a dinner table, before you were even old enough to know you were learning anything at all. So if you're a middle child, or you love one, or you finally understand why your partner reads a room like it's their job, this is why. It was never about being less important. It was about learning a skill nobody else in the family had to learn, out of sheer necessity, long before anyone thought to teach it to you on purpose. And that quiet, hard-won skill is one the oldest and youngest in the family will likely spend years trying to catch up to. If this explains something about yourself you never quite had words for, hit subscribe because we break down psychology like this every single week. And if you've got a sibling who needs to hear this, go ahead and send it their way. They've probably been waiting their whole life for someone to finally say it out loud.